So let's delve into news review this morning on what's making headlines in the dailies, and I want to introduce Gabriel Muthuma, Public Affairs Analyst, karibu sana, Dr. Chris Omalo, Member of Parliament for Kiminini, and also the Chairperson of the Catholic Members of Parliament. Really? You're having a very interesting conversation. We'll see if we have time for that. Carol Maina Mwangi, an advocate of the High Court, karibu sana, and Anthony Oloch, Member of Parliament for Mathare constituency, and also a member of the Catholic Members of Parliament Association.
An advocate of the High Court.
An advocate of the High Court. Okay, that's important. And you're wearing specs now. Have you always said them?
I do.
Oh, okay.
I think you need specs. You wear specs throughout the year that you hosted me last year. They're just different.
Yeah, that's the difference then.
They're different.
At least I was keen to notice there's something different. So now, on the front page of the Daily Nation, you'll see that 2 billion shillings to fight hunger, but what happened to food projects? This is page 5. The government announced yesterday that it had released relief funding to counties affected by current food shortage. But wait a minute, didn't these same counties spend billions on white elephant ventures? We'll be delving into that to look at what has been done so far. We'll be trying to look at the statistics in as far as making provision for drought is concerned. They're not still on the front page. Kinoti, I will send some big fish to committee. The DCI is breathing fire in the wake of attacks on him by politicians opposed to his crusade against corruption. Is he deterred? No, he says, because graft has a way of fighting back.
All right, and speaking of fighting graft, on the Standard newspaper, take a listen to this. High-profile arrest expected after Nurdin Haji receives files on Aurora and Kimwarer that implicated top state officials in the loss of billions of Kenyans of shillings. That's, of course, on page 6, which complements the story on the Daily Nation. The DPP gets dams kickback files from Kinoti. So now the files are on top, are on the desk of the DPP.
Okay. So wait for a decision on whether to prosecute those people who've been
maybe Friday will come and we'll
there.
see arrests.
I don't know.
We'll see.
We'll wait.
Actions speak louder than words.
To do. So where do you want to start?
All right, let's begin on matters, the famine, 2 billion to fight hunger. But before we do that, the Deputy President, William Ruto, spoke on this issue, clearing matters and saying that no Kenyan lives have been lost so far. Take a listen.
The condition of vegetation in the country has been affected by the drought. The situation of livestock has been affected to an extent, and livelihoods have been affected. The first line of intervention has already been carried out by counties. We are now coming to the second level of intervention by the national government. We are not at all behind schedule in government intervening in the drought situation we have in the country.
We have put into place about 31 dams that are going to be constructed before the rains, and that will now add the issue of us mitigating every time there is drought. We are coming up with a new plan.
We also have health, Cicely Karaoke, because of the situation that is happening. Health is a factor. We'll be working with the counties to work together.
What we are concentrating now is, together with the counties, to work on logistics of making sure that food reaches the people in affected areas in a timely manner so that we can avert and avoid any casualties from the effects of drought.
All right, so 31 dams to be constructed before the long rains start. That's, I think, a good place to start with. Anthony Oloch, Honorable Anthony Oloch, let me begin with you. What do you make of these new sentiments coming from the DP? One, the fact that no Kenyan has died, yet you go on the ground. Our reporters from various media houses are on the ground showing us the actual situation. But then the DP says no Kenyan has died so far.
I think it's unfortunate that coming from top levels of government, information now flies faster than wind and light, and you see social media pictures. You cannot say these are pictures from the past or from history. People are dying. I saw a very disturbing picture of a child who, perhaps not connected with these issues of famine was trying to feed a starving baby through a photograph. I don't know if you saw that. And that just shows you the magnitude of the disconnect. One half of the country with so much, and the other half of the country with actually little or nothing to live by. On the one hand, we have billions of shillings being lost in dams and wastages and corruption. And on the other hand, we have people who cannot even have food or water. On the one hand, you have stories of trucks of maize lining up, and I think we are here with Gladys Bosch-Sholai and I believe my friend Chris, saying how farmers have not been paid, and maize is just rotting in trucks. I mean, really, we are living in the same country, and the DP wants to tell us that there is no crisis. And then you had the other official who was even more arrogant, saying that there is no evidence that these deaths are as a result of famine. Surely, I mean, you cannot say that. How would you want Kenyans to react to a situation where they're seeing all these pictures, but you're telling us, give us proof that they died out of? And then juxtapose this with all the promises that the Jubilee government made. 32 dams, 2 of them not even taken off, and what you hear about stories about corruption. And I think then the other point that we need to take into account, and which is where now I think our focus should be, agriculture, irrigation are devolved functions. There is a story to tell about how our counties have failed. And even places where we celebrated, like Makueni, and I still won't take away the feather from what the Governor Kivuta has done. But the stories of starvation, you talk about them, you're talking about Makueni, you're talking about Turkana. Questions must be asked to these governors. Where do you take the money that we give you out of the devolved funds? I think those are very serious questions that must disturb us.
All right, Carol Maina Mwangi. Here's the thing. A lot of Kenyans, if there's one thing Kenyans are asking, is that it's disturbingly amazing how ballot boxes can get to Turkana and in the most marginalized areas. But then it comes to food, it comes to water, it now becomes an entire ambiguous puzzle that we cannot solve. What are Kenyans supposed to pick from the government and the leaders that they elected?
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for having me. We have the National Disaster Management Authority, as well as the Kenya Meteorological Department. So these organizations or these authorities are meant to advise the government of the day of any impending or looming disasters. Right. So the NDMA has said they did their work. Right? The KMA is also on record as late as yesterday saying we gave advance warnings, because if you go through the NDMA objectives, it is to avert disasters. It is to, I beg your pardon, not to avert disasters. It is to warn of looming disasters, be it in this case food security. So what is happening is if both organizations are on record saying we warned the relevant department, so who's asleep on the job here? Somebody, I mean, there's been drought in 2004, 2006, 2009, 2011, 2014, 2016. It's about time. Drought is indeed a natural disaster. But in this case, it's now becoming both a natural and a national disaster way too often. So who's asleep on the job in the Ministry of Devolution? If at all these warnings have been given, it's a shame. That's the big question. It is wrong that if you had been forewarned, why are people dying? With respect, if my Deputy Vice President, if he says nobody died, and arguably they say not of droughts, but there is drought. You see, we can say that people have not died of starvation. However, there is drought, right? That should be what we are focusing on, right? Yes, there have been deaths, and which is very sad, right? As we said in Wasingishu, there's lots of maize that people cannot even sell. Right? So what has happened? What these two authorities, who dropped the ball? Because people need to start being held accountable, right? This is no longer an unpredictable disaster. It is predictable.
Okay. There's some graphics you're looking for to indicate the situation that the country has been looking at in planning. And I want to refer you to the budget of 2018-19. There was a hunger safety net that was set at 4.4 billion shillings as part of the social protection net for the entire country. Then there was a contingencies fund of about 5 billion shillings from the entire budget. And then the strategic food reserve was allocated 1.4 billion shillings. So when you look at that, it comes to about 10.8 billion shillings. But then again, we find ourselves in a situation that there's this very severe starvation among the populace of different parts of the country, like Turkana. So where is this gap? That yes, we plan, when you're writing a budget, we plan with resources, but before they reach those people that need to be assisted, it takes time. What happens in planning?
Thank you. As you clearly put it, our country, we have a presidential system, and the presidential system, Parliament is a budget-making house. And when you look at the budget, as you clearly put it, Parliament did its role, they allocated funds. But the challenge is in terms of implementation. Many times funds are allocated, but the beneficiaries, or whatever goes to as per the votes, you find that a lot of its funds maybe is deviated, maybe in terms of corruption. Look at also NYS. The money we allocated to NYS, most of the time it was overboard because a lot of it is diverted when it comes to matters of corruption. So this issue of food security, if you allow me to say something, is that it is shameful because one of the big pillars, the Big Four agenda is food security. And when you look at the budget policy statement that we've just finished in Parliament, and now we're looking at the division of revenue, the government has not allocated even enough money to ensure that it goes towards food security. For instance, when it comes to issues of fertilizer, they say they're not giving subsidized fertilizer. Then in the long run, at the last minute, we hear Kinjuri saying, we're procuring fertilizer. This money is for corruption, because the time the fertilizer will reach on the ground, people have already planted. So the government, we have a disconnect between the planning and the implementation part of it. Article 43 of the Constitution says every Kenyan has a right to food, has a right to clean water. There was a gentleman who spoke yesterday on TV. He said the deaths that we've had, they're not as a result of drought. My goodness, if we have waterborne diseases, it's because of the drought. If there's no enough food, you can die of marasmus. He speaks to do with kwashoko. Maybe you should go back to school and learn basic healthcare. You can't come and say this. If you have shortage of water and I'm drinking bad water, that's the result of that drought. So the government needs to be serious. And we know very well that 2% of the budget in the county government, it is therefore issues to do with the emergencies. And food is, as my other colleagues had put it, agriculture is actually devolved. So we need a coordinated framework between the national government and the county government. And this drought, by the way, it didn't come from nowhere. It had already been projected. There's a trend analysis which had been done, and after you've done interpolation and extrapolation, when you extrapolate, you will be able to note that at this particular time frame, we are likely to have drought. So governments need to come up with mitigating strategies, both the national government and the county government. And
Gabriel Muthuma, before you take a break, my question is squarely on that, because for certainty, there's a likelihood that next year we'll still have a similar situation in terms of the weather patterns. So how do you ensure that the resources that we set out in the budget, they reach these citizens before that need arises, so that you're hungry today, there's food?
Weather patterns notwithstanding, I think drought, famine, and that element of catastrophe, this is something that has been with us for many years. You're talking about 30, 40 something years. Question we should be asking is, why haven't we set up structures that totally deal with perennial hunger? This is something we expect year in, year out. I mean, given the scorching sun, and everybody will tell you, we expected this. I mean, it actually has been quite a rough year. Just the other day, I was looking at the weather changes and the weather patterns in the US. We saw some countries and states, within the Americas that went to a minus 50 something. That just tells you, so I'm wondering, is this the high time, Wakili, that we start putting Africa into the permanent seat of global warming, because we don't even believe in it. These are some of the things that are, this is the engagement, this is the current discussion. We are pumping a lot of money, as when a country or when a government, Chris, when they say, or parliament rather, when they say they're pumping a lot of money into counties to deal with matters irrigation and to see whether they are going to end the perennial, hunger. or drought. But still, when Dr. Chris is still telling us that there's an issue in implementation, which is year in, year out, you start wondering, who are you giving this money to? When you look at the counties, yes, there's that, like Wakili said, there's that emergency or contingency fund, which is the 2 billion, which has just been invoked by the Deputy President. There's the 2.5% of the county budget that must go to emergency fund. And now you're asking, or you want to reconcile some. People are dying. Where is that 2.5? Should that have kicked in, earlier on, so that actually, yes, there are people who probably the drought may, yes, be coming, the hunger may be striking, but it also comes, like he said, with opportunistic diseases. You have people probably who are taking drugs, who if they miss 2 meals, then that ailment that they are suffering from goes a notch higher. Could that actually be the case where you're seeing people dying? Maybe, So there is this element that Mwananchi must ask. When you're talking about white elephants in a place like Turkana, where out of the 5 constituencies, there were irrigation schemes, and we saw that last year when they were being, when they were being launched. 2 per each constituency. You must start asking this question: who was there at the implementation stage? Who is pushing? Who is there at the planning stage? I've looked at, and probably this is something that we needed to share. Chris, I looked at a planning paper. The Chinese, done by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and what they are saying is that by next year they'll be able to feed their entire population. China. So you start wondering, when did they start planning? To them, they have a plan of 65 years, when most of them know that they will not be alive. But out of those 65 years, they sit down periodically, annually, and after every 5 years to see if you have not actually engaged much on those short-term 5 years, there's no way you're going to hit on the 65. So they come in and ask, why are you not able to rise up in constituencies? And they have constituencies and counties. So I think that's the, that's the kind of, given the fact that we are taking loans from China, I think this is also the time we start learning how they're able to cope with